Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone. In this meeting, we will presentation and discuss the journal about the impact of education expenditure on income inequality, evidence from US states. Okay, and this journal is researched by Brianna Seelfeld from Bryan University. Presentation is presented by Group 5 with members first Risty Indriyani, second Nida, Alfa, Fadila, and third Hidayati Nur Hakimah from Class U14 Economics Education, Yogyakarta State University.
Research background. Over the past few decades, income inequality in the US has grown substantially, largely as a result of aggressive growth in the incomes of the top 1%. The share of income owned by those at the top of the income distribution has grown considerably, with the top 10 owning over half of the income in 2015. At the same time, the vast majority of income have increased little, while others struggle economically or live in poverty. This is noteworthy because those with a dearth of financial resource face consequences that are detrimental to an individual's health, living condition, social connection, development, and opportunities later in life. The next of research background. In order to address this issue, it has become the responsibility of the government to implement policies of redistribution and provide equal opportunities. Fiscal policy, in the form of tax and transfer, has become one of the most effective tools at the disposal of the government to eliminate income inequality. One crucial way of transforming initial socioeconomic disparities is through policies focused on increasing education equity. Therefore, it should follow the investment in education that focus on expanding the number of educated people in society will reduce income inequality. Next is about problem in general. In the US, everyone is required to attend primary and secondary school until the age of 16, so it is made free and accessible to all students. Nevertheless, among that arise as a result of financial differences between the various public schools, there are disparities in the quality of education between communities, since these schools rely heavily on local tax as a source of funding. And then, there are also divergences in the quality of education between public and private schools. And then is research question. In this journal, the writer wants to know how education spending affects level on income inequality, and then what is post-secondary education spending increase income inequality.
Okay, in this slide, we will explain about our research purposes. This research aims to examine the relationship between education expenditure and educational inequality, wherein this research specifically explores the impact of spending on higher education versus primary and secondary education on income inequality in the US states. So, in this research, will be analyzed whether total and segregated education expenditure has a significant effect of reducing inequality on the distribution of income or not. Next, in this slide, we will explain about our research methods. 1. About data. This research used annual data of 50 US states for the period in 1987 to 2015, which includes first, real per capita income data provided by the Bureau of Economic Analysis. Second, education expenditure data provided by the Census Bureau, which is broken down at the state level into tertiary, secondary, primary, and other sections. where the dollar amount of the various levels of education expenditure is each scaled as a percentage of the gross state product or GSP. Third, the unemployment rate data provided by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And fourth, the employment share data provided by the Bureau of Economic Analysis. 2. About analysis tools. This research used the OLS regression technique with time and state fixed effects. 3. About analysis model. The data is analyzed using the model promoted by Simon Kuznets, which includes the log of real income per capita and its squares to capture the Kuznets curve. Kuznets in 1955 stated that as the economy developed, inequality began to increase. After a certain level of economic growth has been achieved, inequality eventually falls, and then falls with a more advanced stage of development. This model is usually captured using GDP as a measure of growth, but since education expenditure is measured using the GSP, researchers therefore use real per capita income.
Then, we will explain about conclusion from this journal. The findings suggest there is a significant inverse relationship between educational expenditures and income inequality, indicating that continued expenditures at all levels of education will be crucial to combat income inequality. More specifically, contrary to my original hypothesis, spending on higher education has the greatest inequality reducing effect, signifying that spending efforts should focus on tertiary education, particularly as it pertains to improving the quality and accessibility of post-secondary institutions. When it comes to fiscal policy decisions, the result reinforces the need for more emphasis on education and public expenditure on education as important tools for improving income equality. And then, the next conclusion is the continued rise of income inequality over the past few decades is not just an individual issue, but a national problem that should concern policymakers. As Heckman 2011 argues, we need a capable and productive workforce that will compete successfully in the global economy. Underdeveloped human potential burdens our economy and leave us with a workforce that is less than it could be. Education is the principal way in which people can develop the necessary skills required to enter the labor force. However, those that are trying not economically face hardships that inhibit their ability to further their education. As a result, the struggles of those at the bottom ultimately diminish the capability of a nation to sustain growth and promote political and social instability. From Ganguly and Thompson 2017. A more unequal society will only exacerbate the problems further. Policymakers have an obligation to address this issue, and these findings demonstrate that one effective way of doing so is through public expenditures on education. And then about recommendation for this journal. In the future, studies on education expenditures should spread early childhood, primary and secondary education spending as a way to capture the distinctive impact of early development intervention. Furthermore, additional contrast variables should be added to the models, particularly demographic variables and an education inequality variable. Also, alternative empirical methods would
also be advantageous, such as models that include time lags on the expenditure variables specific to the type of education. For example, it is reasonable to assume that spending on primary education will not have a meaningful impact on the income distribution until those individuals that are currently in elementary school enter the workforce later in life. And the last is the critique for this journal. First, positive critique. From this research, we can learn about allocation towards primary education. It is likely that the effect will not be seen for another 10 to 15 years. Conversely, spending on tertiary education will have a more immediate impact since the benefit of this expenditure are going towards people who will enter the labor force sooner. Incorporating education-specific time like variables will improve the model by providing a more realistic depiction of the real-world effects of education expenditures on income inequality. And then the negative critique. In the study, the school level should have been separated but have not been separated and are still used as one research object so that the results are less detailed per school level. That's all about our presentation and discussion today. Thank you for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.